Great to see everyone today. My name is Pastor John Hubert, if you're new here today. And we're going to start a new series on the Book of Ruth today. And very excited about it. It is a story. People love stories. And so the Book of Ruth is a story, one of the more contained stories that you can go through. One of the things I found was interesting is I went to a commentary and looking it up, and they were like, oh, here's Act 1, Scene 1. I'm like, oh, that'd be really cool to use that. And then I went to another commentary, and it was Act 1, Scene 1. I'm like, I get the feeling that this is the way everybody lays this out. And so we're going to do Act 1 today. Not just Chapter 1, but Act 1. And I'll talk to you a little bit about the book. God's presence is throughout the book, but only 2 times does the writer acknowledge that God does something. But we're going to see that God is at work, and that's something that we need to understand as we're going through this, no matter if we understand that he's doing it or not. There's another term that we're going to see. We're going to see it said. It's going to be in Hebrew, but Hesed, it's a word that cannot be captured in English. This is why. This is the definition. It is the positive concepts of and attributes of God: love, mercy, grace, kindness, goodness, benevolence, loyalty, covenant, faithfulness. So that's pretty long to put in a verse. So every time they say these things, it's going to be kind of a concept of this. But this is when somebody acts on your behalf or somebody else's behalf, and it is an action, a quality that is in an action rather than a word or emotion, and they do it for the sake of the other person out of love, out of compassion. And this is going to be something that's going to be introduced throughout the book. It's going to be a characteristic of God. It's going to be a characteristic of some of the characters. It's supposed to be what we reflect as followers of God. And so another thing that's interesting about this is the book should not be called the Book of Ruth. Because Ruth, basically it's like we set up a book, and then in the book, we're not going to have this person talk very much, but we're going to name it after her. So it's interesting about the book, but you say, so why did they call it the Book of Ruth? Well, first, Ruth was not an Israelite. This is the only book of the Bible, the Old Testament, that is named after somebody who is actually not an Israelite. In fact, she is a Moabite. They call her Ruth the Moabite, Ruth the Moabite. Just for the record, that's not a name you want to have. The Moabite is not a good thing. It's not something positive. And so they're going to make her this way because of how she responds and how she acts in spite of her background, in spite of who you think she would be. She's not the person you think she is. She's not the Moabite, because when you tack that, you're like, oh, not one of those Moabites. So it's interesting about her. So today I want to talk about facing tough times. That's the first act that we're going to have. And I think all of us go through difficult times. All of us go through times and we wonder what's going on. Why is this happening? Is God even on my side? Why? Lots of why questions. And how do we respond to that in the right way? How do we respond the way God has called us to respond and not become bitter? I think the most common way is when things don't go our way, we blame everybody else. That's one thing I've been noticing a lot that's seemed to be growing, is this concept is always somebody else's fault. This person did this person should have done this. If I would have had this as a baby, all of these things, I would have been just fine. It's all somebody else's fault. And a lot of that even goes right up to God and say, well, God must not love me. God looked down and said, love this person, not you. Okay? And that's the kind of concept that it comes up. So I'm going to jump right into the story because I think it's fun just to go right into the story. And so when we're talking about this, the first scene that we're going to have is the setup for the whole book. And that's Ruth 1, verses 1 and 2. It says, in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi. And the name of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephraimites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. Now, I did a sermon series once on the book of Judges. And I was trying to be creative at that time, and I had the good, the bad, and the ugly theme. If you've ever seen the movie, I started the song because I called my sermon series that about judges. For the most part, you don't have much of the good, you have most of the bad and the ugly. It should just be called Deborah and the Bad and the Ugly. That's what I would call the book if I was going to name it, because she's the only one who really doesn't, you're just like, what are you thinking? What is wrong with you people? Okay, so that's kind of the time of the judges. People are not following after God. They're following after local gods. They're following after whatever, and God constantly comes down and saves them. And those would be the judges. Samson, Gideon, other judges rise up, and some of them, they have good characteristics and bad characteristics. But as soon as they get saved, they go right back into their old life. And so that's important that we understand. Also important to understand that the person that they say, the main character at the beginning here, is a man of Bethlehem in Judah. And so Judah, or Bethlehem, we need to understand, is a small, insignificant town during this time. It's like, it's not nowhere, but you can see it from there. Those kind of towns. Now, this is the way I describe it. If anybody ever goes to the Twin Cities, and you hear somebody say, I'm going up north. Okay, what they mean is St. Cloud. All right, that's maybe a little bit north of that. And so I'm at these meetings, I'm at these statewide meetings, and our superintendent is saying to himself, we're going to have this retreat up north. And I'm like, he grew up in Duluth, so he has no excuse. And he says, it's in Brainerd. And I said, you mean central Minnesota? And he goes, well, I guess. So don't stop calling it up north then. We're up north. And then, but for a lot of people that live in the Twin Cities, there is nothing north. Okay? It's just like Canada. All right? That's us. And I think this is what Bethlehem would be thought of at this time. Bethlehem of Judah, it's like, seriously, we're going to do a story about Bethlehem? In the Old Testament, it's not a nothing town. In fact, that's why it's so amazing in Micah when it says Bethlehem, you are going to have the Messiah come from here. It's like, seriously? You're going to pick that town that nobody knows about, that nobody cares about? And the other thing you need to understand, and when we were doing our night in Bethlehem here for Christmas, that it means the house of bread. And so it's an area that usually has bread. And you're going to see that there was a famine in the land. And a famine, usually at this time period, is something that is caused by God's displeasure with them. So every time in the book of Judges that the people would get off on their own tangents, following after their own gods, he would say, fine, you want rain? Pray to your God that you think is going to give you rain. You want to follow Baal? Ask him for rain. And it's like, well, he doesn't give us rain. There you go. And the fact that we know that this was only for this area, and it was a unique area, all he had to do is cross the Jordan and go into Moab, which is just a little ways away, and this famine stopped. That tells you that this was a famine just for that area. And so we see that the main character here is Elimelech, and then it has everybody as they relate to him. So he is the one who is kind of moving the ball forward here. He's the one who's saying, we're going to go to Moab. We're going to go there. And it says they're from Bethlehem, they're in Judah, and they went to the country of Moab. They keep mentioning Moab. You're like, so what's the big deal about Moab? Well, if you look at Moab, first of all, I just want to back up a little bit. Elimelech, in the Old Testament times, there was an issue that your name meant something. And so if you see the word El, it means God. So we think his name probably means God is king. So his parents had an attitude that God is king. That's why they named him that. Naomi, her name means pleasantness. Okay? So that's a good combination. Their sons' names have basically, their meaning kind of has a sense of sick, fragility, and mortality. Do not name your kids these names, is what I'm trying to say. Hey, you're sick and you're fragility. I don't think that that's a good move. But what it seems like is Elimelech is not following his name, is what we're trying to say. Because what should he be doing? If God is truly causing this famine, he should be saying, God, what must we do to have this famine stop? It's not go to Moab. It's not to go to someplace else. It's to find it here, because this is the place that you have given us in the promised land. So the fact that he went across there, and so what is it about the Moabites? Well, here's the background of the Moabites. They started from an incestuous relationship of Lot and his daughter. The Moabites were the ones who tried to stop Israel from passing through to the promised land when they came from Egypt. The Moabites seduced the Israelites into their gods and things like that. The constitutional exclusion within the law said that you could not have a Moabite in the assembly of the Lord. And basically, also, just recently in Judges, the Moabite king was the one who was oppressing them. But besides that, they're great people. Okay, besides that, you look at it, you say to yourself, wait a second, this is not the people. You're not supposed to marry into this group. You're not supposed to go to this group. These are not people that are followers of God. And so they go to the Moabites. Instead of dealing with the situation, instead of saying, you know what, my name means God is king. I'm going to pray to God that he is going to overcome this famine. I'm going to say, if there is sin in our land, let's pray about it and find a way. His solution is, let's go where we're not supposed to go. Let's do what we're not supposed to do. And I think that can happen a lot of times in tragedies. We think to ourselves, well, we've done nothing wrong. It's obvious that we've done nothing wrong. There's nothing we have to change or confess or whatever. It must be somebody else, right? It must be God or whatever. So, God is going to let us do it at this time. He's going to let us cross into this. I've heard this said before. Somebody was trying to explain this to me once, that it was a pastor and his daughter was going to marry a non-Christian. He said, but she can't find any good Christian guys. So in this case, I think it's okay if she marries a non-Christian guy. But just that same concept of, the situation is, we're just going to go with it. And in tragedy, in tough times, we need to seek after God. We need to seek after him. And maybe there is something in our life that we need to change, that we need to come to him, like the whole book of Judges. And so then the crisis moves on in verses 3 through 5. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, now notice the change right away. All of a sudden, who's the main character? Naomi is, because everybody's according to her. And the husband died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. They lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. So basically, they escaped the famine, but they experienced death. And death comes on. Elimelech, basically, he leaves, and he goes away by dying. And then her sons, their solution is, we'll marry women that we're not supposed to marry, that actually, in example, they carry their people away from this. In fact, the word that is used for their marriage is lift or carry a woman, instead of the normal word to take a woman as a wife. And this is a negative connotation. They shouldn't have had Moabite wives. They shouldn't have done any of this stuff. They shouldn't have stayed there. It said that he said, I like the original thing, it said he was going to sojourn there. You don't sojourn, if you know the word, or take a little trip for 10 years. I think I'm going to take a trip to Yellowstone for 10 years. No, that's moving there, okay? That's what you do. So, and the other thing that we understand, that it seems like they may be, with the death and all of these things that happen, they may be under judgment, is you notice that the men were married for 10 years, and there are no children. And in that time period, when that happened, it was a lot of times a place of God saying, I'm not going to allow you to have children with these women because you are being judged for what you are doing. Although the narrator never tells us for that fact, we see that happens, and we see that that they have not had children for that period of time, which in that time is a long time. Because having children was very important at this time, and they weren't having it, which proves, and if both of them aren't, you can understand that there might be something wrong. So then it moves forward, and Naomi is alone with her 2 daughter-in-laws. So what do? We have to understand this. This is a very male-dominated world. You had a choice. You went from your father's house to your husband's house. And if you did not have one or the other, you were in trouble. You were in a situation where you had no place to go, you had no protection, you were basically going to be alienated from society. They had a problem of widows. That's why even in the New Testament, they're always talking about how to take care of the widows in society and things like that, because that was a big part of what the church needed to do to make sure that they stepped in to help people because of the male-dominated society. So, verse 6 to 10 goes on to the next scene. It says, "Then she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab. For she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and had given them food. So she set out from the place where she was with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, 'Go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband.' Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, 'No, we will return with you to your people.'" So here's an amazing thing. They did not have any obligation to her. The daughters-in-law had no obligation to her. The best thing for them in their own cultural understanding would be to go and find new husbands where they are, because that would make the most sense. So she tells them, first of all, she sees that things have gotten better in the place where she should have been the whole time, was in Bethlehem, in her home country. And she acknowledges, and the narrator acknowledges here, that the Lord had visited his people. That's where she should have been waiting for in the first place. The Lord had visited her people. Now she's like, well, maybe I should stop and go back there. I should go back there because maybe there's hope now, because there's bread in the house of bread. She needs to go back to where this is at. So she took off, and they returned to the land. And she tells them, "Go back to your mother's house." Now, I just told you this is a male-dominated society. Nobody says, "Go back to your mother's house." They say, "Go back to your father's house." So when she says this, the only time that you say, "Go to your mother's house," is if it's for marriage and procreation. It's for getting married and having babies. And so they're saying, this is your solution for that. Go to your mother's house. This is the solution for that. And then she asks a blessing on them. Now, this is interesting. We're going to get some positives about Naomi. She's going to come up and she's going to say, may my Lord, the Lord, Yahweh, the God of Israel, be kind to you as you have been kind to me. And so she says that to them in a way that's interesting, because in this time period, there was no understanding that your God could cross over to another area. Now, for a few of you, you may have to look this up later, but when I was a kid, there were lunch boxes, and Friday night was all about the Dukes of Hazzard. All right, some of you may remember them, some of you may not. I'm not sure they're worth watching again now, but I'm just saying. But one of the things I learned was Bo and Luke, all right, they were always getting in trouble, all right, and Roscoe was chasing them, and Roscoe was the county sheriff. And what was their goal? Get to the county line. If you cross the county line, you all of a sudden saw the brakes of the cop or the sheriff car. Can't cross the county line. And they were safe because this authority was only in that county. You could not cross that. And so it was always, there's car chases and doing ridiculous things that you shouldn't do. But that was always the thing, get to the county line, because that can happen. This is how people thought about their gods at this time. They thought that their gods could not move across lines, could not move. Like, this is the white god, and you're Asian. You can't have that happen. So you had to move. Gods only had their certain spots. So Moab, she's saying, my God bless you in your territory. You're a Moabite in Moab. I want him to bless you. So she had at least a little understanding that her God was bigger than just her area. And she said, and that God would also give them rest and find them a husband, and that they would have peace and hope in their lives. And so she told them, go, and they said, no, we won't go. We want to stay with you. And so she thinks that God is going to take care of their families, that God would be with them, that Yahweh, the God who made a covenant with Israel, could also do great and mighty things for Moabites. That's amazing. So then we have the next time she talks to them, she gets a little more firm with them. But Naomi said, turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. When they lifted up their voices and wept, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So she says, you know what? I'm going to be very blunt with you. Turn back. Don't go with me. Maybe she understands that if they go to Bethlehem, they're going to be Moabites in Bethlehem. Moabites, again, not a good reputation. They're not supposed to be there. They're not allowed in the assembly of the Lord. They're not supposed to be there. This is a big deal. And then she says, let's just be honest about this. We think she's about 50 years old at this time, which is quite old in this time period. I'm older than that right now, so I can tell you it's really old. But this concept is that this is, quite old, and she's not going to have a kid. She says, would you wait then 20 years for my kids to grow up so you could have babies with them? And you're not going to do that. You want to get married. And she kind of just goes all logic on them and says, you're not going to do this. And why would you do that? She said, why would you refrain from marrying the whole time? Could you imagine watching this little toddler? He's going to be my husband someday. I don't think so. I just don't think so. And she's pretty logical with them. But then you can kind of see her attitude starting to rise up a little bit here, how she's handling what has happened. She says in verse 13, it is exceedingly bitter to me for the sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. God's out to get me. Why would you want to be with me? Because God obviously can't stand me. Because he took away my husband, he took away my sons, he made me move. No, he didn't make you move to Moab. You chose that yourself. But she's kind of got this attitude. And I want you to understand this. Her name is pleasantness, but this bitterness is starting to rise. And what I find with a lot of people that I talk to in the ministry and a lot of people that you'll meet all over is that when you go through a tough time, you can either turn to God or you can become bitter. And I've seen people that are just incredibly bitter because they say to themselves, it's not fair, God wasn't nice to me, God must hate me, it's not this. And you can already see this rising up. The hand of the Lord has gone out against me. Not just that, hey, I caught a few bad breaks, but God up in heaven just took his hand and just said, I'm going to do mad things to you. Okay? And the bitterness. Why would God do this? Putting the blame on him. So then she kisses them and says, go, just go, return. And Orpah does, but Ruth sticks with her. She sticks with her and she says, I'm going to stay with you this whole time. And then verse 15, she said, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and from where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. So we see a change here. Now, I told you that Ruth is a Moabite. So as you're reading the story, you're like, oh, those Moabites, They never do anything right. They're always mean to us. They're seducing us. They won't let us through their land. They started bad. They're all just bad people. Well, who looks like the good character right here? Who's rising up to the occasion? Who is saying, you know what? I care about you, Naomi. I'm going to take care of you. What she's basically saying is, I'm going to help you at the best that I can as a woman in a culture where women did not have a lot of rights. She says, I'm going to do that for you. And she says, but we also see how broken Naomi is and how her theology, we don't understand where Ruth gets the understanding that she gets. This is proof that you can have a bad teacher or a bad pastor and still get good doctrine. Somehow. Okay? I'm hoping that you're not proof of that. So I'm just asking right here. All right. But she says, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people. Okay? Those people go with those people. We hear that today. Go with your people. Wink, wink. And we kind of wink, wink when we do it now. But they were very blunt about this. And she says, to her gods. Her what? Why would you send a woman back to somebody who's not real? Why, if you're a follower of the true and only God, why would you send somebody to worship a piece of wood? Why would you say that? That's not helpful. And obviously we see the problems with her theology. First, her theology is, I'm not going to take any responsibility for any famine that's going on. I'm just going to run away. I'm going to blame God for anything bad that happens in my life. I'm going to let my sons marry women that they're not supposed to. And then, you know what? Gods are gods, whatever. Pepsi, Coke, same thing. Just different brands. But then look at Ruth. This is probably one of the most beautiful statements. You've heard it at weddings. You've heard it all over. It's one of the most beautiful statements ever in the Bible. And I think that's why people love the book of Ruth. But basically, she says, don't. Where you go, I will go. I'm going to be with you no matter what. Wherever you stay, your people shall be my people. Understand, the people of Naomi don't like her. I'm going to be with your people, but your people hate me. And she says, where you lodge, I will lodge. And he says, your God will be my God. Your God, I'm going to switch to your God. I'm going to switch my allegiance to the God of Israel. This is the term. She's saying, the God, your God. So she says, your God and my God. She's not necessarily nailing it. But then she does in a little bit when she says, when you die, I will die. Basically, I want to be buried in the family cave. That was the system at this time. Everybody had a cave. I'm going to be there. And she says, may the Lord, and now she uses the name for Yahweh. She says, the Lord, Yahweh. She must have heard Elimelech and the boys and Naomi at least use this term and pray, because she says, I'm going to pray to that God that you talked about before, even though you seem to be kind of mad at him. I'm going to be saying, may the Lord hold me accountable. And if I do something wrong, if I turn my back on you, let him give me his worst. And then add to that. You notice that she adds that. She says, may the Lord do so to me and more. I'm putting my everything on the line that I'm going to follow you, and I'm going to do whatever it takes. If I don't have a husband for the rest of my life, if I don't have the things in this society I'm supposed to have, I'm going to stay with you. And finally, Naomi says, we should go. So what a wonderful story. We should stop right there and everybody could go home. Because it really is a nice place to stop. Because that's the way you deal with a tragedy. You get together and you say, we're going to fight through this. We're going to give our allegiance to God. We're going to give it to the God who said makes covenants with people. We're going to go that direction. Well, the last scene. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, is this Naomi? And she said to them, do not call me Naomi, call me Mara. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi, when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me? Well, the first thing you understand is there are two women that are coming back to Bethlehem. So she's been gone for 10 years. It's not a very big town, so they probably know what's going on. They probably heard what's going on. It's, like I said, I mean, they didn't have a lot to talk about. They probably, hey, what's going on with Naomi? Anybody here? Oh, yeah, her husband died and her kids died and this kind of things. So they're like, oh, I wonder if she'll come back. And so there she is. And when they came, the whole town was stirred because of them. You notice it's two women, of them. The first thing they probably said is, excuse me, is that a Moabite you're bringing? They're not allowed here, right? This is not right. But here's the biggest thing. Notice how they say, the stirred here. They think this is like murmuring, like, ooh, what's going on? Because they said, is this Naomi? And we think there's a couple of reasons for this. The first reason is she's back, and the other reason is, what happened to her? She's an old and bitter woman. That the murmuring, the stirring that they're doing right here, if you put all of it together, kind of gives us the sense that they looked and said, she was a pleasant woman. Her name means pleasantness, and man, what happened? You see this with people that are bitter, it'll age you fast. You're 50 going on 90. I mean, it's just like the bitterness and just the scowl and everything. And it's just like you've changed your whole countenance and you just have this way. And they're like, is this the same woman? Okay. And then she gives him proof. You're right. Don't call me Naomi. Call me Mara. That with the name means bitter. Call me bitter. She's owning it. This is not the way you respond to tragedy. The end is not the way. And the Lord, she says, the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. Now you need to understand, she uses two words for God here. The word Lord means the covenant God. Almighty is more of a generic term with L, and it's talking about the God who has his angels, who keeps people in line with his angels and punishes people and gives them good things. But the Lord is the covenant God. So she starts out with the Almighty. The Almighty just basically sent his angels to smack my life around. He just doesn't care about me. And she says, I went away full. And the Lord, Yahweh, the one that we have a covenant with, he took everything away from me. I left with a husband. I left with 2 sons. I come back empty because God has ripped everything away from me. The God, my Lord, the Yahweh, has done this. So why call me Naomi? Why not just the Lord? And the Lord, again, has testified against me. So in other words, God up in heaven just said, that Naomi, she's terrible, and God's out to get me. God's out to get me, and it's all his fault. I didn't do anything wrong. I have done everything right. I went to Moab just like, wait, the Bible didn't say I should do that. I let my sons, no, that Bible didn't say I should do that either. But it's all God's fault. Now, I can identify with that, unfortunately. We say to ourselves, why is God being so mean to me? I do all this stuff, and God doesn't bless me. Are you doing what God called you to do? Well, no, but he should still bless me. He's the Lord, right? It means he's out to get me. The world's out to get me. My neighbors are out to get me. Everybody's out to get me. After a while, it may be you. That's what I like to tell people. It may be you. I had a friend. He had 8 jobs in 10 years. The boss is always out to get me. We all had to sit down with him. We're like, there's one thing in common in all of these jobs here. It's not the boss. I said, we're your friends, and we're going to let you know this. And it's the same with God. Are there times that God allows, the book of Job, does God allow bad things to happen? But it's not that God's out to get you. It's the fact that bad things happen in this world. But God is there to help you. And if you stay with him, if she would have stayed in Bethlehem, she would have had better things. Her sons would have married better ladies. She would have had all these things. But no, she says it's all God's fault. In fact, she says, notice how she changes it back to the Almighty, the impersonal, the Almighty has brought this on me. He brought calamity. The Lord said, oh, she's terrible. Almighty, poof, dump on her. But this is going to make you a bitter old person. And you say, I'm only 18. You can be a bitter old person at 18. You really can't. I've seen it. It's like the world hasn't gone my way. It doesn't go ever in anybody's way all the time. How do we handle tragedy? And Ruth The woman who should not have the best attitude has the best attitude. She's going to a town where they're not supposed to marry her, where they're not supposed to. That she's going to a town where she's not necessarily going to be accepted, but she's loyal. Naomi has somebody with her the whole time. She has can you imagine being, at this time, if you're a widow, you'd have no one with you. She has a friend. She has someone that says, I've made a pledge to you to stay with you forever until you die. That's great. Most people would love to have that. But no, she's mad and she's bitter. So when we look at our lives today, when we look at tragedy, we look at things that are going on in our life, the first thing I think we need to understand is this something that God's trying to get our attention? Is there things that we need to change in our life? Now, I'm not always saying that everything that bad that happens in our life is our fault, but sometimes we need to make changes. And it doesn't mean go further away from God, because that was the solution that they came up with. Elimelech's like, hey, it's not working out here. Let's go further away from God. No, stay with him. And we also have to have the attitude of, you know what, I'm going to stick with God. We have to have the attitude of Ruth. I'm going to stick with God no matter what. I'm going to stick with with who I should be with. I'm going to be with him no matter what. And not become like Naomi and say, I'm bitter, bitter, bitter. Call me bitter. I'm so bitter you should name, the name should just be that who I am. Because all that's going to do is drive you further from God, drive you further from the world, drive you further from your friends, drive you further from your family. But instead, we should understand, and she knew it. We admitted that the Lord had given grace to Bethlehem. The Lord had stepped in to give them bread. She even said the Lord could help her daughters-in-law in Moab. But for herself, no. So we need to say and learn from this, God, what do you want from us, and how can you carry us through this time of tragedy? Why don't you stand with me today? For our prayer ministers could come forward. If you're here today and you've never accepted Christ, you've never made him the master of your life, today is the day to do that. Just come forward, talk to one of our prayer ministers. If you're here today and you're going through a tough time, you say, I identify with this tragedy. I identify with what's going on. We believe in a God that is not bound by anything in this world. He can handle anything that you have. Lord, we come before you today. Lord, the default in our world is to become bitter when tough times come, to blame God, to blame others. Lord, let us turn to you, not away from you. Let us look at our own actions, God, and see if we have turned away from you and what we have done. And let us look to you for the solution, because God, it was the ultimate solution for Bethlehem. When they turned to you, you came back to them. Lord, it was the ultimate solution, as we're going to see throughout this book, where you're going to be true to her, even though she doesn't deserve it, God. Lord, let us not become bitter. Let us become more turning to you, God, and have our faith grow in you. We ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen. Now go and bring the kingdom of God to our community.